Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City code and zoning consulting firm. Today, I have Rob Rogers of Rogers Partners with me. Rob, pleasure to meet you.
Hey, Sisto.
Always great to have
Yeah.
you. Today, Rob is going to talk to us about education buildings. Does all kind, state, city, private, charter, you name it, he does it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of education buildings. We go back a long way.
Started with an education building.
Right.
My first one.
Our first one. And we did some work at Pratt together with a good friend of ours, Tony Gelba,
Yeah.
who we've worked with for 4 decades. And I always have a lasting memory of meeting you, Rob. And I remember I was in my 20s. You had just started your firm with Jonathan. And I went down to your office. I believe it was on Varick Street.
Yeah, probably Hudson.
Oh, Hudson. You were
Yeah.
on Hudson. What number? 345?
145.
145. Okay, I knew there was a 45, and I remember going to your office, and there was a young lady, and you and Jonathan, and I met you both, and we fast forward to you and Jonathan building 2 fabulous firms. Now, split. You have your firm, and Jonathan has his, but we collaborated on a lot of projects together.
Yeah, 20 years.
That's I mean, you didn't break me, Dom, and Sergio's record of 40.
Yeah.
We're on 38. We're going to make it to 40, God willing. But 20 years is a long time. And our first project was with education. And the last project we got with you right now, our most recent project is education, complex one.
Yeah.
But so tell us a little bit about, this evolution. I think one of the main reasons I wanted you on the show was to talk to me about how we have renovated buildings 40 years ago, and some of them we're actually going back and
Are ready to go again.
we're
Yeah.
ready to go again. So
I know.
tell us what the programs have changed, what clients are looking for these days for the students, and what the classroom looks like.
Well, the education stuff we do is really a diverse collection, right? As you mentioned, I mean, we've done childcare for SCA, but we've got a real staunch group of work for the independent schools in and around the New York City area and district. And we've done a bunch of charter schools. And they behave differently. If the architecture is the bones of the pedagogy. And so whatever a school is in its character and its essence and how it wants to operate, that comes out spatially and materially.
Oh,
And circulation systems.
you go to schools that we've worked on together, and everyone that you go to visit has a different feel.
Yeah, we always start off with each institution has its own character, really almost like an individual. They all make decisions differently. Sometimes it's a very powerful head or head of board, and it's almost like working for a corporate environment,
Right.
Decision making. And other times it's very democratic,
Right.
or hierarchical and
Yeah.
those things. And that's one of the first things you need to understand is how does this organization make decisions? Because that's our job, is to bring them things to make decisions about, right?
Right. And the ones that could make the decisions efficiently and quickly seem to be really great clients and great people.
Great clients.
And the product comes out, And I also see that, we've worked at some schools with certain individuals. Their consistency of being there for a decade or 2 or 3 just makes the project.
It really counts. We've got a number of our clients, we've been working with for 15 years or more.
Or more.
In some cases, because schools evolve, they grow, they develop new programs, new directions. The buildings that were right 30 and 40 years ago have really changed, both in terms of the academics for
Right.
specialized spaces, but also athletic capacity.
We've been seeing a lot of science and technology.
Totally different.
Totally different, in a different space, a different environment. And athletics, that's been a big push too, because they didn't have the space before, and now they're getting much more creative of how to do that. You know, dig the courtyard out, put it on the roof, move this, move, because it's become, especially on the private side, on the schools on the Upper East Side and the West Side, we've had a lot of challenges with your office trying to get a PA on a roof with existing stairs. So it's tough.
Totally. And you want to occupy the roof, and you know, sometimes neighbors have opinions about playgrounds on the roof. You know,
Fire department access,
yeah,
just
like
a lot of things.
Athletic centers. We did one on the Upper East Side that's completely around athletics, major court with all the regulations and 500 spectators. I mean, where do you find that in Manhattan?
Right.
You know, a whole bunch of squash courts.
Right.
And so it's trying to get those really, they're very specific size spaces into the zoning boundaries.
Right.
A lot of times we'll end up at the BSA.
Right.
And, you know, we look to you guys to support us when there's in situations because you got to understand, you know, and the BSA is pretty good most of the time, understanding that a school environment, you know, it's not a developer, it's somebody really delivering programmatic needs for kids.
Yep.
And, you know, we're about to start another athletic center on the Upper East Side. And in this case, you know, one of the things we're working with is they've got such limited access to Randall's Island, and it's so competitive that to actually get physical exercise as part of a curriculum is a real challenge.
Yeah, and logistically, you know, and it's funny how we go to meetings, and I was at a meeting with Josh Kaplan about a project, and you go there and you're thinking about, well, we're meeting with the architect, we're meeting with the owner's rep, and we're going to talk about code, strategy, filing. 2 hours of the meeting was talked about logistics. It was about, we can only do this in the summer. The neighbor won't let us work after hours. We have no summer programs, but it has to be out on this date. And we need to move the air conditioning, but we need air conditioning back on by this date. And you're like, wait a second, this has nothing to do with code. This has nothing to do with architecture. And Josh was juggling all of these prerequisites that your consultants in your office had to think about to say, if we remove this air conditioning, how are they going to have fresh air when the kids come back to school? So, you know, we all look at architectural record and say, oh my God, Rob Rogers designed this beautiful building. But that's just a small piece of it. Yeah. The front end piece of it is having people on your staff and yourself and your consultants. The logistics to build in New York City for a school are incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it's both logistics and pure logistics in the sense that the same time we were building this athletic center on the Upper East Side, we were building a brand new building for Rice University in Houston. And, you know, we had 4 sides access, lay down space. And we were up on the Upper East Side with a condo under construction across the street. You couldn't close a lane. You know, it was you have 120-foot long steel trusses coming into the city.
The running joke in our office about that is about Ivan always did Queens, right? And his big client is St. John's University, which we're doing a new basketball facility for them. And Sergio would always say, Ivan, do you know what underpinning is? Because it was on a 200-acre site. But that's so rare in New York City, right? But that's the same thing.
That's the reality.
You're in Rice University, unbelievable, right? And then you're in Manhattan, and you're trying to add 2 stories on top of a building on the Upper East Side, and there is a million moving pieces.
I never talked to my New York client about the cost or the schedule of the Rice of the Rice project at the same time. I mean, the other side of that in the logistics is that most of the time when you're working on schools, you know, they're active.
Yeah.
And it's in session. And some schools, they all have a little different policy between construction and students and stuff. But one of our longest running clients, you know, we've probably done projects there for 15 years. And no construction worker has ever been in the same space as a student. And that's their practice. And so
You
tenant
understand
protection
it.
plans, how do you
Occupancy.
phase it?
Right.
Who's where, when, how long are they there? You know, and that's where it gets into it, especially when we look at you guys, like kind of like the one you were talking about with Josh, is somehow we got to be able to occupy these spaces in certain ways, even though it's in transition or in flux, and it goes along the way.
Yeah, I'll always remember this project, and I remember it clearly that I went to a meeting, and they had to remove a stair, and it was on the plans, and school was out, and the contractor pulled the stair out, and I got there and I said, "You have no stair." He goes, "Yeah, but there's no students here." I go, "But you have workers.
Yeah.
How are they getting out?" "Oh, they have ladders." I go, no, that doesn't work. And this was on a school. But that GC had built schools all around the country,
Right.
but in a suburban setting where they had other rules. New York City is completely different. And immediately they hired a scaffolding company to put in a temporary stair within a few hours. Literally
Yeah.
had to get, because they were afraid the job was going to get. So those things happen, but we spend more time before we even start construction trying to understand the phasing. When do the kids come back? How do we get them back? How do they circulate? Where are the sheds? Where are the bridges? What are we doing? Where's the office? Where's the construction office? You know,
Where do the buses unload?
exactly, and that's
know,
a big,
Is all kinds of stuff.
all kinds of stuff. But that's what makes it fun. But I'm always intrigued that, like, the SCA has their standards, and as an architect, you kind of have your creativity, but you gotta live by those standards. But when you're doing private, which you do a lot of, there's a lot more creativity. There's standards that are normal practice, but it's not regimented like the government.
You do get some flexibility with that because you can kind of operate more flexibly on things. Charters are kind of different. They tend to be more stricter. They're on a, similar to public school schedules. They don't
tighter
have as
budgets.
much tighter budgets, a little less flexibility programmatically.
Right.
But they're incredibly impactful. And one of the main reasons that I think schools is one of the major components of our practice is that it's that impact. When we were walking in a few minutes ago, we both said, "Boy, we're getting busy." And you said, "How are you getting people?" And people come to us because they want to work on schools.
Yes.
They want to work on institutions. They want mission-driven work.
Yes.
That's satisfying, And I have a great story. We did a K through 8 in Baltimore in connection with Johns Hopkins. It was run by their School of Ed.
Wow.
Really super creative. The dean of the Graduate School of Education was actually our client.
Wow.
Very innovative pedagogically. For him it was, I want to spatially break down the idea that you've got one teacher and 30 students, and use space to do that. We broke it into a bunch of different serveries where 2 grades at a time gather, no cafeteria, right? He was great. He said, "You tell me one good thing that's ever happened in a cafeteria." So it was a fantastic thing. We built this great school. It's in East Baltimore, so
I love innovators like that.
challenging neighborhood. And it was right away, nothing in the building is no fancy materials of any kind, but there's a generosity of light and space. And that's what we did. And I was down there when it opened, and this 3rd grade kid, who'd been going to school in the local school that had trailers on the parking lot and out in the playground and stuff like that. And he walked in and goes, "Is this for me?" And that's why I'm an architect, man.
Right.
That kind of impact.
Yes. And it's someone was on the show, Kimberly Murphy from Edelman Sultan, Knox and Wood. She came on, and they do a lot of affordable housing. I mean, that's their world. And it was funny that she said that what inspired her to be an architect was Barbie. That her mother bought her a Barbie doll, and then all of a sudden, she was building with her brothers or something like that, and she wanted to be an architect. And she said when she decided that, she picked a firm that she felt as though she was giving back. And she says one of the things, and I agree with it because I feel the same way. When we get a C of O and people start moving into that building, and they could have been homeless, they were down and out. This is a life-changing experience for them, and we were part of it. Yes, it's nice that we did 20 years ago. We did Taylor Swift's apartment in Tribeca. Yeah, that's great to put on, and it was wonderful, beautiful design. Everything was great, but the feeling of a child going into a school or someone who was down and out getting an apartment.
Yeah.
We do a lot of churches, a lot of synagogues, community centers. That's the essence of why we went to architecture school, that we get something not just financially back, but we get a sense of purpose.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. That's sort of, I'll be cautious with your audience, but I've often said, architecture is a really beautiful profession, but it's kind of a mediocre business.
Yes.
So make sure that you're doing something that
you
feeds
like.
the passionate part.
Of course.
And it's a lot like a school, a little bit different, but the Boys and Girls Club we did, you remember up on
we worked on that.
on Bradhurst.
Yeah,
and
Bradhurst,
by the viaduct and by the polo grounds and
Yeah.
stuff. And it's hugely impactful on the community.
Boys and Girls Clubs are throughout the country. They bring so much to the community. And listen, communities were communities, right? They go to a local place. We like to go out west. You go into town. There was the movie theater. That was the community. There were millions of acres, but they went to this little town to be with other people. And New York City still has that. That hasn't gone away. We may not see it as much on the news and here and there, but when you go to Astoria, the Boys and Girls Club is still on 21st Street.
Yeah.
Right? And you go to Bradhurst, it's still there. You go to NYCHA, we're still revamping gyms and community centers throughout the city. It's still part of their new program to maintain those centers and actually make them bigger because they work.
It was really this one in particular was interesting because that group ran 4 other Boys and Girls Clubs. And this was their first ground up in years and years. And when we were doing our early programmatic research, talking about it, one of the things that came out is that they struggled with teen retention.
Yeah.
As kids hit 13, 14, 15, other attractions.
Yes.
And that's where it was. And so we said, well, that's what architecture's for, is to offer a program that'll
entice them to come back.
I don't know if you remember specifically on the project. What we did is we built a skybox over the basketball court that looked onto the basketball court and looked out on Jackie Robinson Park.
Oh, wow.
And everybody in the building could see who was in there, but you had to be over 14. And so it became the hot spot in the whole building, and their teen retention rate is 4 times better at that club than other ones. Right?
Amazing.
And so this is what we think we can bring, right, to schools, learning environments, community centers.
Without a doubt.
To help solve real
and that's
issues.
what architecture is to get people through the building and find these places. One of the things that we talked about after COVID that, and you and I briefly talked about it on the way in, that our clients weren't fundraising. Kids were leaving the schools. They were moving to they were going to, different types of boarding schools. They were moving to the suburbs. One of our clients told us they lost 400 kids. Now they're on the rebound. But now when they're redesigning these spaces this summer, a lot bigger spaces, a lot more flexibility. They're not so confined. they became this way that they could use these spaces in multitude of ways, where before it was, I need this, this, and this, give me 3 classrooms. It's not that way anymore.
Yeah, there a lot of stuff in the flexibility, ranges of sizes.
Yes.
Because I think, especially in the independent school world, you have broken down the 1 to 25, and things are taught in very different ways.
Yes.
We have had a great client together for a long time that is a school that specializes with learning challenges and different ways to learn.
Sure.
And so you take on a client like that, where all of a sudden we need to have kind of a room within a room for special training and teaching and
So
observation.
all those preconceived notions you have of education that you may have used before, now you take on a different client that has different needs, that brings you to a different place.
Absolutely, and the spatial organization.
Sure.
And now I got to egress differently. I got to solve different things, because you want the building really needs to support how the teaching is managed.
Sure.
And for each school in that way.
Rob, one of the things that I found out through a fellow developer who builds charter schools, he was explaining to me, which it saddened me a little bit, to be honest, that if you have a charter school in New York State, New York City specifically, but it's run by the state, not the city, and you want to open another charter school, you have to have one already. They're not giving new ones. You have to have one established already, and it has to be within a certain distance of that charter school. So the ability to actually bring in new charter schools right now in New York State, I've been told, is very difficult, if almost frozen. And that saddens me, because I see on the charter schools we've done a lot with you and other architects. You talk about fulfillment and going there and seeing some of these kids that have a different opportunity that they never had before, because it's a different way of teaching. It's a different way for them to see it. It saddens me that they never really open that up more, because I think there is a bigger need in New York City for the charter schools.
Everyone we've done is like filled.
Yes.
Filled immediately. From the local neighborhoods, in which they reside.
And we did one with E.W. Howell up in Harlem, and same thing. They built the first one, and it took a while, but they filled it, and now they want to expand, and they have some land left over, so they're going through some process. But there's so many buildings that are vacant or partially rented, that not only the DOE is not taking, but charter schools could use them and expand their programs. But unless it's within a certain distance, they can't do it.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, because most of the stuff we're talking about is really urban.
Yeah.
And it's so different than schools in suburban environments or other places where you've got land to spread out. You
could put an addition on.
Never more than 2 stories, your kind of stuff. And we're stacking kids in 9 and 10-story buildings. And then it's really important, how do you move those kids around?
Look, I went to Brooklyn Tech. It was 13 stories, no elevator. We had to run down the stairs from one end of the school to the other. And that was built in the 30s?
Yeah.
Brooklyn Tech's been there forever. I went to school there in the 70s. Still the same school. Still
Amazing.
There. And you talk about my graduating class was 1,600 kids. Graduating total in the school, incoming freshmen was 2,500. They had 7,000 kids in that school.
That's unbelievable.
Crazy, with no elevator.
That's where things have really changed. Like on one of the charters we did, that's really multi-story like that, and you don't put kids in the elevator. They're in stairs.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to make the stairs
comfortable.
Great stairs.
Right.
Because the kids spend time in it, time in between class. It's got to be simple, thoughtful, intuitive circulation.
And not dark and dingy and...
Time between classes
it was
really
4 minutes.
critical.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And so it's a very, very big deal.
At Brooklyn Tech, when that bell rang and you knew you had to get to the other side and that teacher was tough on being late, you literally got to that back because they had two exit doors on each, and we had the transoms with the lights on top from the hallways, and you would get to that back door and you were boogieing. You were boogieing. You didn't have a but that was part of going to Brooklyn Tech.
Yeah.
That was part of the fabric.
That was part of the spirit. Yeah.
And it made you accountable.
Yeah.
You needed to know you had to get out. You couldn't dilly-dally. Get to that stair, get down there, and get to that classroom. That was important, and that prepped you for the next place. It was part of the fabric that you were responsible.
That's interesting. The school in Baltimore, one of the issues they had was that a lot of times the kids weren't consistently at school. Maybe they were with a different caregiver or another parent, or some things happened. And so we located this big, what we called the house. That's where the servery and common room was for these grades. So that when you're first or second grade, you could see the one that was kindergarten, and you could see the one that's third and fourth.
So you knew where you were going.
Where you're going. Where did I come from? Where am I going? What's the next one? And the building got more complex and multi-story as you got up to 7th and 8th grade, when you had the responsibility of moving yourself around the campus, not just class to class. So you can take those things that were incidental in the past and bring them forward and give it intentional place.
Right.
Yeah. We had a school on the Upper West Side that was founded in a brownstone. And they were moving to a new building. It was going to be about, they had a co-tenant, but their portion was going to be about 7 or 8 stories. And
that's big.
They
went from a brownstone to a 7-8 story.
Yeah. And they were really concerned that the culture of the school, which had been built around the staircase in the townhouse of teachers and students and parents and everybody
being so tight.
Everybody knowing each other. And so what we did is we actually built the school with a big open stair all the way up through the middle, and put the middle school up high and the lower school down low, and the shared programs in the middle, so that you you took that mixing and you stretched it out so that it all still happened. It just had extensions to it.
That's
like
awesome.
That,
so I wanted to, I'd love to ask you this question, which I will. This concept of this gentleman down in Johns Hopkins who created this, has that model been seen, and has other schools used it as a prototype? Because it seems amazing to me.
What's happened is it's called, instead of a charter, it's called a contract school.
Okay.
It's a Baltimore public school run by Johns Hopkins Department of Ed by contract. So they provide a lot of the faculty, but not all and not everything.
But in terms of the design itself,
it has not been replicated. It's been replicated in other countries, let me tell you that. And we learned from other countries when we were doing that work. But the strength of the unions around a teacher owning their classroom is tough to shake in the United States. It's tough.
Got you. So because I was going to say, it to me, it just seems so creative and innovative that you would think that with a model like that, in a country as big as ours, there could be a lot more room for this model.
You need it to be in places where people have that desire for experiment and innovation, and understand what it can do for education. Always challenging when you're in school systems we deal with other places around the country. You're fighting for budgets. Why would we do it different than the last one? There's a lot of that.
Right. I was going to say those challenges and unions and we've done it this way for the longest time. Why are you trying to make us change this? Our staff isn't used to it. The kids aren't used to it. So
all of that happens.
All of that happens. And as an architect, I know I do. You always walk past a place and go, oh my God, this is a beautiful design. You ever stop for a second and think of all those things that went into making that? Not from just picking materials and making the space and the light and the air and all of those things, but all of those other challenges of dealing with teachers and boards and the board of the school and the neighbors. It's just,
They're
it's
very
really
complex environments.
Yes.
But they are, education. I've always is really the kind of one of the most fundamental commitments of being civilized.
yes.
And how you do it collectively, how you do it properly, how do you do it in different environments, how do you do it fairly? Those are all real issues. And,
Sure.
And as architects in this area, we're right in the middle of that.
Oh, and we
and I
the
feel
beauty. What I love about New York City is I don't know what Josh is going to call me with next, right? Because you could work on a big school, you could work on a floor, you could work on a boiler room. I mean, we just did a boiler room for you guys at a cultural center. It's a boiler room. It was incredibly complex.
Yeah.
The laws are different. The codes are different. How do you change this? How do we get fresh air in? How do we do this? How do we not disrupt it? This part's landmark. This is, I mean, that's what I love about New York City. And then especially in the education, we do everything from, preschool all the way through colleges. We're at Pratt University, we're at St. John's, we're at NYU. We don't know what they're going to call us with. We could do a parking garage or we could do a new stem cell. It's so diverse and so much fun and challenging. So I say this to you, Rob, that we've worked together as colleagues for almost close to 30 years at least.
Yeah.
At least. It's never boring.
No. And
It's never boring.
You get the child care center and you got all the rules and the Board of Health and all that other kind of thing. And then, we have a project right now up at Columbia University, which is, they call it a plaza, but it's actually the roof of a building below, and there's 4 other buildings that egress onto the plaza to get the street, and it's just like this,
Amazing.
But how do we solve all of this at the same time?
And the thing that makes this city great
it work.
is that if you look around hard enough, you will find a subject matter expert to be part of your team. That's what makes this,
That's for
from
sure.
historical documents to people like Sergio, to people like Bob that we talked about with facades. There are so many eclectic people in this city that know so much about everything, but putting great teams together create great projects. There's no question about it.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think the more complex and problematic, actually, the bigger responsibility of design and architecture, because that's how you solve those things.
Sure,
They got to happen all at the same time.
And like I said, we were at that meeting, and you could tell that every person at that meeting, their wheels were spinning because they felt as though they had this obligation to this group of people and to that school that, hey, we can do this. We're going to do it. We will figure it out. Not one person said, oh, no, that's impossible.
Right.
Because that's not allowed, right? Because
not.
we know in New York City, you got to find a way.
Yeah, and it means you got to have the right contractor, the right subs, and that they're going to have to perform outside of the norm because the school has the norm, right?
That's right.
That's what it's got to be.
100%. Well, this was great. So, Bob, at the end of every show, a good friend of mine, Andrew Peters, who's a cost estimator he was at Curry and Brown, now he's at Silvers. He always says, in estimating, he doesn't look in the rearview mirror. He always looks through the windshield. He goes, they made it small because we got to look forward, not back. I know you and I are very optimistic about our niche in education because a lot of fundraising is going around. A lot of things are changing. What's your prediction for the next couple of years in our world in terms of schools? What do you think they're looking to accomplish for the students?
Each one is going to be different. We're doing a lot of science.
Yes.
And we're doing more than the traditional labs, actually, moving on into science research. Some of these places actually bring PhDs doing work into the high school level science programs. And it
Yes.
takes very sophisticated equipment that then can't stop if there's a blackout. So it changes, like the level of sophistication
Yeah, it's
is
definitely, we've seen
is
that
upping,
also.
upping
It's
quite a bit.
yes.
And then the more normative classrooms is really about flexibility and quality of life issues. We are so much better now at controlling sound
Yes.
and making sure it's a
Light.
great listening environment, at managing natural light in all of the spaces. And so I really, it's a great place to be doing architecture at this time.
And the other thing is your office does landmark buildings, preservation, which is always fun, always challenging. And then as you go through these things, you can see that even the educators are looking at their buildings differently. And we're noticing that as well.
My favorite is an example of where one of the independent schools is 7 buildings built over 150 years. 2 of them are individual landmarks. One is a Mitchell Lama housing project with a school underneath it. And it's sort of like
So diverse.
the jurisdictional agencies that get involved in each piece of it. And so I think that's also where our experience comes into play is, you don't get daunted by all of that. You go, we're gonna weave something
and you
out of
assemble
this,
the
and we'll
team like
find
we
it.
said
Yeah.
before. We can do this. So one thing that we didn't touch on, and we're going to end the show there. So come next summer, there's going to be a new existing building code, which
Yes.
we've talked with Josh about, Kaplan, because in the next few months, Rob's going to be designing something, and we have to make sure that we're going to file it before or after July of next year.
That's right. And we got a lot trying to get in before next July.
Yeah, and it would help if we could see it, right? Because they didn't really publish it yet, where we have a format. So that's going to be a challenge. But from some other colleagues of ours that have been in the business a long time, they see a lot of positives because they're more adapted to the IBC, which is going to help us where, our PA spaces, you can't turn left, right, this, that, where there's going to, I think it's going to bring on some really great changes for us, especially in the education side. I think it's going to give people like yourself and your firm some more flexibility and more creativity where we're still designing in the 68 code that's been around almost 60 years now.
Which is kind of crazy.
Crazy.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they've adapted some small pieces. So we're going to have you back before July of 2027. And we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Because I think that's going to be a really hot topic in the next 6 months.
Great.
Rob, I could talk education with you for hours, but the show is limited.
Yeah.
But we're going to get you back here. It's
Great.
a pleasure.
So thank you so much. And we've had a great run with you guys.
Oh, I appreciate that.